Okay, we're going to continue on, and this one here would be, before I get on into it, just completed the 1979 year for racing and going into the 1980. This particular photo right here is from 1980. This would have been at Orlando Sports Stadium, Orlando, Florida, the start. And I guess that was me when I had the Fox jersey in the lead there. That would have been at the start there at the sports stadium. But anyway, what I wanted to do before I actually get on with sort of my races and results and that, I want to give an overview of the racing and that, just to give an idea of what back in 1980, this would have been like, say, late 70s, early 80s, how motocross looked here in the United States. At that time, motocross was becoming very popular. It was a very fast-growing sport. It had grown to great numbers, very popular. Riding areas were just everywhere. I mean, in the local area and that, you could ride anywhere. There was trail systems that just went on and on. Land was open. The landowners permitted people to ride. There was trails. Around here in our area, you could literally go almost anywhere on a trail system, from Shakelyville to Hadley to Franklin to Oil City to Jamestown, and on and on and on. And when we would go to Florida, and you could ride, we would be clear up in by Titusville and up by the Space Center, and the trails that went over towards Orlando and all around Cocoa Beach. And just in that area, just around Cocoa even, we could ride forever. And it was like that in most everywhere around the United States. So plenty of areas to ride. So a lot of kids had motorcycles. Well, even if they didn't race, they had motorcycles and they would ride trails. And then a lot of those kids would lead on into racing and that. And that's why the numbers were growing so high. Whereas today, over the years, the landowners have gradually shut down their land due to lawsuits and everything else. It's just gotten ruined because they would leave their land open. Some kid would be riding there, they'd get hurt, and then they would sue the landowner. Or they would have farmers, people would be riding the trails, and then they would run out through a crop field and ruin farmers' crops. Just disrespect for farmers' land, lawsuits. I believe liability was the main reason that a lot of landowners started shutting down their property. So what happened is then trails would get shut. The trail used to connect from point A to point, say, C, and landowner B in the middle would shut down his property. Now you could no longer connect them together. And just over the years then, as one section after another got shut down, become less and less areas, so the number of kids riding has greatly decreased. So the numbers at the races anymore have drastically dropped. We're back during the late 70s, early 80s. Typically starting gates could hold 40 bikes, and it would not be uncommon that a lot of classes would have to be split into multiple groups, and then they would do qualifiers down, or they would run Group A, Group B. But it wasn't uncommon that classes could have more than the 40 bikes and would have split in some of the larger classes. And most all your classes would be full classes. So just a brief overview there of how racing and that racing riding was back in that time period compared to today. Today, most areas for kids to ride, very few people ride, as in the numbers as in comparison to back then anymore. And strictly because now a young kid gets a bike, and the parent got to load the bike and haul it to a paid riding area to even ride, to a practice track or a riding area to go riding in that, where they can't just ride from their land as freely as what they once could. So I wanted to do this little segment here just to give an overview then of the competition level, the number of people racing during that period of time. And also to give an overview of the AMA. The AMA is the governing body of most events for motorcycle racing. I think today they have well over 200,000 members, but they're across the board. It's just not just motocross. They do anything related with motorcycles, whether it be road racing, hare scrambles, hare and hound, desert racing, motocross, supercross, hill climbs. They are the governing body for most of those events. They are the largest organization that does that. You have other smaller ones around, such as CRA and ones like that, that govern. They might be a governing body for a smaller area, but the AMA is over the entire United States. So then so you have to belong to the AMA to do racing in any AMA sanctioned event. The AMA then breaks it down into districts. So you could say the AMA is over the entire United States. Then out of that, they have, like, we were in District 5. District 5 would have been, like, say, most of Pennsylvania, say from the center part of Pennsylvania to the Ohio line, goes over part of Ohio was in District 5. The upper part of West Virginia was in District 5, and the lower part of New York was District 5. So District 5, it's not by state, but it's by a whole district. Notably, I would say the California districts, I'm not sure what their number is out there, but there are certain districts out there that had some very high level of competition out there. And in the early years, like in the late 70s, early 80s, you didn't have internet, things like that. So the factories, most all of them are located out in California. They're headquarters for the US, like Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, and so forth, Honda. Their headquarters are all in California. So the top guys of the factory were much more familiar with the district riders there in California. So that is why at this period in time, a lot of your factory riders, Bob Hanna, Glover, Barnett, Marty Smith, all those guys come from California because that's where they were from. They lived out there. The factories were located there. They recognized them and they picked them up. So a lot of your factory riders just come from California due to that. That being said, District 5 back here in Pennsylvania was also the district we were located in, was another very tough district. We had a lot of competition here within our district. There's just different districts within the United States that are known for being very tough districts with high level of competition. District 5 being one of those. But not near as many factory riders come out of District 5 simply because the factories were located in California, their headquarters in that. Over the years, that has somewhat changed. You'll see a more diverse group of riders from all over the nation picking up factory rides, but it wasn't quite the case back in the late 70s, early 80s. So that's how the AMA is structured and broke down into the districts. We were located here in District 5. So just to give a rundown of some of the competition level then here for District 5, I went back through the MX Vault, which is basically like a yearbook, history book, where you can pull past national numbers. And how that works is every year, out of the pro nationals, they rank the top 100 riders, and they are all assigned from number 1 up to number 100 are given a national number. After that, it's made up. The rest are your local or district. The A class is also those guys that hold pro cards can run the nationals, but they're going to run their AMA number, where your top 100 are assigned a specific number. So going through the vault, and I pulled up a list of the riders that from in the 80s that commonly raced around this area, and I'll give the ones that were here some of the time and some of the ones that raced here all the time were. So these national rankings were from anywhere from in the very late 70s up until about 83, 84, and a few a little bit later, but I'll give you the names of the riders and who they were. And some of the names I may mispronounce, but you had Arlo and Gluten. He did race here in District 5 occasionally. He would come around, not here all the time, but he held a national number of 4 in 1979 in the 500 Pro National class. This here was their overall ranking from the whole season. So when I'm given national numbers, this isn't just from one event. It would have been their ranking for the entire year. You had Gary Pustelak, national number 10, 1981 in the 500 class. Gary, from right here in Erie, PA, owned Cycle, well, it was his dad John owned Cycle City, but Gary pretty much run it, and he had his younger brother. Gary raced here all the time. He was basically a local rider. He would be here an awful lot of the weekends when you went to the races. You were racing against Gary. He was around here. You had Alan Paisano, national number 26. I believe he was from Ohio. Could be around occasionally. We didn't see him a whole lot. Frank Stacy, number 8, 1974 in the 250 class. His brother Andy Stacy, number 8. Both from New York State. Once in a long while they would be around here. Not very often, but once in a while. And I'll give a little short story with some of these riders as I go, I guess. I don't remember whether it was Frank or Andy, but one of the weekends they were here at Mercer at Hughes. We were racing there, and for whatever reason I got Clay Marsteller's bike ready the day before. Clay also running the A class, and maybe I didn't tighten the front sprocket well enough, but Clay and it was Frank or Andy were in the race together, and Clay, I believe, was leading, whichever one of the two it was, and his front sprocket fell off on that day. Just a little short story to go with them. Chappie Blouse. Chappie, I believe, was from Arizona. I always pronounced it Blouse, but I believe it's actually Blouse. And he was ranked number 8 in the 125 Pro class. Not sure what year that was. That little story to go with that. Chappie, factory Kawasaki rider, shows up at Harbor Woods one day, and that day there I kept a journal. I took a 4th. I believe Chappie took 3rd. Not sure who took 2nd or 1st that particular day, but I did see that notation in my journal of racing that I kept. That was probably in like 80 or 81. And the other part of that story, never knew it, but yet today in 2000, and I know it was in 22, 20, not sure if he's still running yet today in 23, but watching the Supercross races and that, and there's, I believe it's, I can't remember his first name, but there is a pro rider in there today who is called Blouse. That Chappie was actually his uncle. I would see the name all the time watching the Supercross and that, but not knowing that I was just mispronouncing Chappie's last name wrong. It is actually Blouse, I guess, but okay. Moving on, Jeff Hicks. Jeff Hicks was from Atwater, Ohio. He would race around here occasionally, so on any Sunday that you showed up, Jeff could be there. More than likely he was not, but he would be there occasionally. He held a national number of 11. Jeff Hicks and Bob Hanna are good friends even yet today. I was watching the Whiskey Throttle show when they had Hanna on, and he was talking that him and Jeff still go riding yet today. And this here is in 2023-24 air, but Jeff also from around here, national number 11. Tom Carson, national number 20. Tom has been around and still racing yet today. He's been around for, seems like forever, but he would race District 5 in that fairly often back in the day. You had Carl Hand, and you also, national number 53. They were from Ohio. You also had Dave Hand, also lived over in Ohio. Yet today, it's either Carl's son or Dave's son, not sure which. Jeremy Hand, still racing, at least was last year in 23. I would see his name at a lot of the supercrosses and that, trying to make the cut. So some of these names you recognize even yet today. I'll be watching the race and see the name, and here it's a father or uncle. It's the son of one of these guys. But story there, they raced around here quite a little bit. And one of the days, not sure which one it was, we were at Harbor Woods racing, and I'm just going to say it was Dave, crashed in front of me off of one of the jumps, and I cracked him in the back of the helmet. He wrecked in front of me. Didn't do it intentionally, but I hit him in the helmet. And after the race, he come over, and I thought he was going to be kind of ticked off because I had hit him. Wasn't really my fault, but he actually apologized for crashing in front of me. But just a little story to go. I'll give the stories as I come across some of these names. Gary Semix, Lisbon, Ohio. He was national number 2 in 1970, maybe 6 in the 500 class. Gary never raced against him. He was already pretty much full-time pro at that time, and that was prior to me coming around, but he was also from this district. He also had Tony DiStefano from Bristol, PA. Again, another one like Gary. He was a little before my time. Never raced against him, but he was from Bristol, PA here. He held the number 1 plate in 1975 and numbers in 76. Not sure which class it was, maybe 250 class or 500. John Savinsky, number 8, also from PA, 1978 and 250 class. Don't remember ever racing against him either. You had Denny Swartz, national number 20 from Reno, Ohio. Emery Andon from Bell Vernon, PA. Emery Andon was a District 5 rider, raced around here quite often. You'd see him around. Timmy Coombs, national number 15, Morgantown, West Virginia. Timmy is Davey Coombs's younger brother. Timmy and Davey both raced around here, District 5 riders. They would be around here quite often. If you were racing back in late 70s, 80s in the A class, you were going to be running against those guys. Timmy you don't hear much of today. Davey runs MX Sports today, which is the head of all the outdoor nationals, and his sister Carrie Jo Coombs. I believe she's considered the CEO of MX Sports, and Davey, I don't know if he's director or what, but he is kind of the head of it and runs that. Little story to go with them is one time, this would have been in the early years, they were still, well, it would have been in the probably 80s or so. Harbor Woods was a very popular track at that time, and say High Point was also. So we had a little tournament or shootout. It was just a local weekend thing where it was sort of like High Point riders versus Harbor Woods riders. So in whatever class, and they kind of kept track. It was sort of like a team competition thing. I'm not sure what class I was riding in, but I would have been a rider for obviously Harbor Woods at that time, and the Coombses would have been for High Point at that time. Don't even remember which ones come out on top, whether High Point won it for the day or whether Harbor Woods. It was held at Harbor Woods when they did that. But Tim Dome from Charleston, West Virginia, national number 35. Raced around here quite a little bit, District 5 rider. Tim Shepard, another one, District 5 rider, national number 48. Johnny Shea, national number 14 from Berg Hill, Ohio. Johnny raced here all the time. He was a Harbor Woods rider. There most of the time. He was going to be there. Berg Hill, Ohio. Johnny, at that time, I just remember was always, I'd always thought he was like the wild guy. I mean, you did not want to be, if he was around you, you were nervous because you didn't want to be jumped on or smashed into. And Johnny was always just kind of a wild rider. But national number 14. Jeff Glass, another District 5 guy. Raced around here all the time, common at Harbor Woods, Mercer, all the local tracks. Chances are Jeff was going to be there. Jeff went on later. Don't know what national number he ever held, but he was one of the first that I remember ever bringing in like an outside of the industry sponsor. Jeff did a lot of the Supercrosses and Pro Nationals, rode for Surf Laundry Detergent. Not really sure how he got that sponsorship, but he was, most of your riders would be sponsored by somebody from within the industry, whether it be like Bell Helmets or JT Racing or DG or somebody that was involved with the sport. But Jeff brought in an outside sponsor, which was Surf Laundry Detergent, was his sponsor. Mike Jones. Mike was later on in years. He was become much more well known in the later years, like in 1988, 1990. He did have a number of results in the earlier years, but Mike held in 1988 and 1990. He took second in the 125 East Supercross Series. Both years he took second. Don't remember who won the title that year, but he was second. Mike had also got very involved into freestyle motocross. He was actually what I would say was one of the very originators of freestyle. I know they give Deegan and Metzinger and all them sort of claim to it, but Mike was really one of the very first originators. Mike was, at that time, some of the pros was going overseas, over to Europe in the winter and that. They could make good money over there. Paris and that, doing the races over there, making good money. And Mike kind of got known as, they called him Mad Mike. One of the promoters just assigned him that name over there, doing some of the crazy stuff he was doing. And Mike then started doing like freestyle tricks and that. So this had to be like in the late, no, I'm going to say early 80s, probably, of doing that. Early 80s to mid 80s, somewhere in there he was doing that over there. I believe Mike won the very first like Red Bull X Games, gold medal winners. I think he was the very first winner of that. Also invented some of the freestyle tricks in that, like the Kiss of Death, different ones there. But Mike was a local guy right down by Pittsburgh, Delmont, PA. And I'll give a little story to go along with that. At the time, it was probably, I'm going to say 1982, somewhere right in there. First time I ever run into Mike. It was at Rocky Ridge, PA. We go there. I had no idea who Mike was, just a local kid. And I go there. And at that point in time, I was typically had a very good shot at winning. But anyway, Mike was there. He was also a very fast kid. And that day there, straight up race, no crashing, wasn't mud race or nothing. I took the overall and Mike took, he either took second or third. I'm not sure. I'm going to say he probably took second, but I took the first overall. And then at the awards thing at the end there, I was standing there, got my award, the first place trophy or whatever it was, money, I don't remember what it was. And Mike come over, I didn't know who he was, reached out, shook my hand, just said, "Good ride, dude." That was the first time I ever remember Mike and meeting him. So a lot of guys didn't do that, so I'd always, it was shortly after that, 83 or so, I quit to get married. I was getting out of the racing, then kind of quit. But I'd followed Mike's career after that, and always kind of took note of what he had done from that. And also another time, I guess it was me, John Gallagher, probably Wayne Kara's story. Was doing the Harrisburg Arena Cross out there. Again, had to be early 80s, and Craig Martin, who then at that time, I believe John Ayres still owned J&J Cycles, but Craig was going, and so him and Craig and Mike went out, and so we all pitted up together there out at Harrisburg there at the Arena Cross out there, and we got a little unique story about John Ayres' trailer that weekend that he let us borrow, but I'll tell that a little later in another segment. But so anyway, Mike Jones, District 5 guy, very fast. He had John Ayres. John raced around here all the time. John owned J&J Cycles, held a national number 99, but John also did some off-road racing like your hare scrambles, Blackwater 100, stuff like that. But in motocross, he held a national number 99, which John then later went on to start Gear Racewear. Mark Garrison, national number 55. Mark raced around here all the time, a District 5 guy. He would be in there. Mike Misko, not sure that Mike ever held a national number, but Mike was a District 5 guy, also held his pro license. Probably just, if he did have a national number ranking, I didn't see it listed, but Mike had the capability, he could win on any given Sunday. Just, he probably didn't hold a national number because he just didn't do enough of the nationals. He just did the limited ones here on the East Coast. You had Dave Hand, again from Carl Hand and that, his brother. Davey Coombs, also already said who he was. He's now the director of MX Sports. District 5 guy, raced around here all the time. Ray Somonos, I called him Somo. I believe at the time he was from Gillette, New Jersey. He held a national number 15 later in the pro years. I first met up with him competing against him in the, would have been the 125B class, running for a Loretta Lynn's national amateur. It was maybe in a regional at High Point, and he was, this would have been his region come back here, so we met up there at High Point. First time I ever raced against him. You had Kenny Keelan. Kenny, believe he held in 1982. He held in the 250 pro class, 5th place national number. Kenny, I believe at one time got a factory ride from Honda, not sure. Kenny was not a factory rider in the, or not a, he was not a District 5 rider. He was from Florida. We met up with him when we were racing the Florida Winter AMA Series down there, raced against him down there. Actually, the picture that's showing right there from Orlando Sports Stadium, Kenny would have been in that race right there, because that's where we first run into him racing against him. Freddie Andrews. Freddie held a national number 7 in the 125 class. Not sure what year that was. Freddie later become very well known for the GNCC series off-road. I believe he held the #1 plate in that series for a while. Ron Heben. Ron Heben also, I believe he rode probably out of, it was like J and something Cycles right over the Ohio. I got one of my 1974 MX 100 come from there, but I believe Ron Heben also got his bikes out of there, just over the Ohio line, Measury, Ohio. But Ron Heben then, it was in the very early 80s, somewhere in that area. He left this area, moved to California. Not sure if he was racing out there or what, but he then become the team manager for Kawasaki's factory pro team. He was their team manager, and I believe he stayed at Kawasaki for a number of years as their team manager out there. Another one was J.P. Bunting. Raced around here quite a little bit. 1979, this wasn't a pro national number, but it was the amateur nationals. He took In '79, he took 8th in the 250 Amateur Nationals. JP, he ran around here quite a little bit as a District 5 guy. So now I got actually the District 5 Amateur National Qualifier standings. That I'm not going to hold the video camera here on them, but just running down the list here real quick. This here was the riders and that from that year. I'm going to go back through and I will read off these names. So this here was the Amateur National Qualifier Series final standings. So these would have been all District 5 guys, so some of the names you will recognize. And I won't, no particular order here in that, I'm just going to pull the main ones that you would really recognize. Would have been John Kroner. There's also John and Bill, he had a brother Bill, both of them. I don't know that they ever held national numbers, but they were very capable of winning the A class or local pro class in that. On any given Sunday, they were here all the time. James McGafferty, here all the time. David Johnson, John Thompson, Tim Shepard, Richard Clements. There's an Anderson, not sure who he was, but Timmy Coombs, Charles Goodby. Charles Goodby rode for Team Green. Team Green was a Kawasaki support team. Before you turn pro, they would pick up some of the amateurs. So Charlie Goodby was a Team Green rider. I don't remember the year, but it was at High Point. They would hold races the day before the pro races, and it wasn't up on the main track. That year they laid out a track down over the hill, but Charlie was involved in a first turn crash, which he was killed. It killed him. I wasn't right there at the moment, but they said he caught a foot peg in the throat, and it cut his throat open, and I believe he bled out from that. But that was a tragic ending there. But Charles Goodby, I'm going to guess that was probably around 81 or so when that happened there. And again, injuries were quite common in motocross. Not so common to get killed, but it did happen occasionally. Another kid that I was in a race, actually, I'll give another story of that, but he was killed as well. But you would have guys that would get paralyzed. That was really the worst of the injuries, was to be paralyzed. But nobody ever wanted that to happen, but it did happen occasionally. And occasionally guys got killed. But you would have broken arms, broken legs, collarbones, a lot of injuries that way all the time. But I'm going to continue on with the list. So you had Goodby. I'm skipping over a number of names here. Jeff Iorio from Newcastle. Myself. Denny Gibb. Mike Venetia. Mike Venetia was pretty decent A rider, but clear back, me and Mike raced together in the 100 class. That would have been clear back in '78. It was me and Mike were the main competitors back in the 100 class, but then Mike also went up through the years in that. But anyway, Mike Venetia. J.P. Bunning, I already mentioned him. Tommy Allworth. Leslie, we just called her Leslie O. Her name was Olinger, something like that. Leslie was a girl. Also in the A class, run the A class. And there was Leslie and Tina Clary, two girls that raced back then. There were some others, but those two got pretty quick and fast. I don't believe Leslie O ever earned a national number or anything, but she was an A rider back then. Bob Felmley. Bob Felmley, know Bob pretty well. I mean, somewhat friends in that anyway. Bob owns World of Wheels over in Senning. Just sold it here about a year or so ago. Still see Bob every now and then. We've got a few stories to go there, but I'll wait to. Dave Clausen, again, I'd already mentioned him many a times. Me and Dave traveled together a lot. Heasley, Randy Robb. I ran into Randy at Dave's. They had a memorial service for Dave after he had died here. I hadn't seen Randy for years, and I'm at this memorial service for Dave, and Dave's sister was given a speech or whatever, and she wasn't really familiar a lot with Dave's racing years. Again, Dave and his siblings, they were just sort of separated as children somewhat. But anyway, so she's given a memorial speech, and she said, I had seen somebody here that had also raced motocross back with Dave. This is at her speech at, she was talking at Dave's memorial, and she said, would you put up your hand? I seen another hand go up, and I thought, wow, who is this guy? So anyway, in the end, I didn't recognize him. So in the end, before I left, I had to go over and just find out who. Here was Randy Robb. Just didn't recognize him from many years ago. So it was nice to get to see him at Dave's memorial, and we talked a while on that. Clay Marsteller, also in there. Again, me, Dave, Clay traveled together all the time. Dean Hepler. I give a little bit of story of this, and I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that Dean Hepler, me and him raced together in the 100 class quite a bit. He was another one of my competitors, say one of the ones that had chances of winning or doing very well, clear back in the 100 class. And I believe it was Brock Hepler, factory Suzuki rider. I believe Dean is either his father or uncle. They're from down around Contanning, but Dean was around here all the time in District 5. Not positive, but I believe Brock is, again, a son or a nephew of his. And Brock, later on, factory Suzuki rider. Leland Musquire. Leland, very fast in the minis in the 80 class, later moved up into the 125s. And Leland was in there for a win on any Sunday in the District 5. So you had not just the guys that were holding national numbers, you had a number of these guys that just because they didn't hold a national number didn't mean they weren't in there for a win in the District 5. So again, out of all these names, when I said back then, when you went to District 5 and run the A class, you might as well be, half of them, you know, in there could have been in the Pro National. And the competition level was very high. Stanley Lowjack, another District 5 guy, but Eddie Lowjack. A lot of people would recognize Eddie Lowjack. The Lowjacks were very big more into off-road racing, such as the hare scrambles and that. They were well known, pretty much nationwide for that. Off-road racing in the early years of like the Blackwater and stuff like that, hare scrambles and that. But very well known in the off-road racing. But they would do occasionally motocross in that as well. District 5 riders. Got a little story to go with the Lowjacks. Is this would have been early 80s or something. One day there wasn't a motocross race going on that day, but there was a hare scramble, and this here was down at Rocky Ridge. I had never done a hare scramble before in my life. And a hare scramble was essentially a 2-hour off-road race. Might be over 8-10 mile loop through the woods, whatever, just laid out a long trail through the woods. They might do part of the motocross track, but through the woods. But it went on for 2 hours, where motocross was generally more down around your 15-minute mark. 15 minutes, it was like very exhausting to do a 15-minute moto. So anyway, me and Clay decide we're going to go do this hare scramble. So me and Clay go down there to Rocky Ridge, sign up in a hare scramble. I had never done one before in my life. And so, again, hare scrambles are going for 2 hours. My thoughts are, oh, 2 hours, it got to be a much easier pace where you just go out there and set up a good pace and just maintain that for 2 hours, but it can't be that fast. And boy, I was in for a surprise. So I go out there, and of course you want to win, so you start out as hard as you can in the beginning. And so I don't even know how long we're into it, maybe less than an hour into it, and I am fatigued, extremely fatigued. Clay's bike broke, so he's out of the race. But every time you do a lap, you come up, at that time, it wasn't electronic scoring or nothing. You just pulled up between two barrels, like 55-gallon barrels, and they would have the different classes rode on the front. You pulled up, yelled out your number, and then tell you go, and you continued on. Because usually it'd be so muddy, that's why you had to stop, give your number, and go. And it would be just, you'd continue doing laps, and at the end of the 2 hours, it's whoever's leading and has the most laps in. So anyway, I'm out there, and you come up to this muddy, it was muddier than heck, these ruts, bikes are just everywhere stuck. Come up, and I kind of come to a stop because it's jammed up. Here comes Eddie Lowjack past me. He doesn't stop. He just starts jumping, sort of like zigzagging back and forth over this rut through there. And I'm thinking, oh, that's how you do it. And seeing you can't stop in one of these races, and the pace is quite high. But anyway, story back there to Eddie Lowjack. First time I ever raced against him. Come around, I don't know where it was at, I come around to these barrels. I have no idea where I'm at in the race. And I don't know, maybe another half hour to go, and I come around, and Clay's there kind of as support. And I said, I'm done, I'm quitting, I cannot do this. And Clay said, you can't quit, you're in third. So I keep going, but my arms are so pumped, I can't hold on, I can't. Anyway, end up third overall in that hare scramble. But that's the story of my first hare scramble ever, and Eddie Lowjack. And all I can remember from that, after that, when it was over and done, I couldn't even move my hands or arms right for almost a week. I mean, I was so sore and so fatigued from that. Literally, it was almost a week to recover from that. And I said, I will never do one again. As you said that to other things, I have. But that just the story with the Lowjacks. I'm just going to continue on running down these names. Till I get to the end. I see here in the there's Tina Clary, Roy Hamer, Thomas Allworth, and there's a Bentley in here. Not sure who he is. There's many names here that I skipped. I was just picking the ones that I remember and as some of the top competitors. And that, so that kind of gives you a rundown of the competition level that was in District 5, late 70s, early 80s. And a few of the stories to go along with them. Now, I'm going to do a separate video for what I'm going to call the 1980 racing year. This one was more intended to give who was around at that period of time, who the riders were, what the competition level was. Things like that. I'm sure there's a lot of them that I've probably missed and skipped, so if anybody's ever watching this video, I'm sorry if I missed your name in that. Again, this is a lot of years later. This here is 2024, so some of this I'm going off memory and also from pulling up from MX Vault and past articles and stuff that I got in newspaper clippings and that where I'm pulling these names from. So I'll go over and just give a little more of the details on this here. some of the, or here was, this one was John Ayres, overall winner. That had to be at the Blackwater 100. Doesn't say, but I know John was big into that kind of stuff. This would have been, I'm guessing this was probably Timmy Coombs. It was a number 3. He was on a mini bike at that time. It says Coombs number 3 becomes big number 1. So I'm guessing that was an amateur national number there. Mike Venezia. Mike, and he was a big competitor of mine, clear back from in the 100 class. These guys here, I just remember going, we were down in Maryland. There was Jeff Lanahan. This here would have been 125 expert class. I remember meeting up against him down there. I think it was called Elquista, something like that, Maryland. We used to go down there racing sometimes, and I remember meeting up with him. I just remember the name, and the announcer was saying out of hand Lanahan. So I'd always remembered him from that. Don't know the guy or anything, but did race against him down there in Maryland. Here was Coombs and Jimmy Nisley. Leland Musquire and Mark Garrison, both there. You can see Leland has on one of the Keystone jerseys. I also got one of those there. That there was Keystone was George Quay, who later become Pro Action. So that's a connection there. Leland, I hadn't seen Leland for quite a few years, and I'm going to say this year was probably 2022. Dave Clausen, we're older now, and I'd seen Dave, and Dave said, hey, let's go to a race sometime together again, just to watch. So anyway, we go up to, we were up at Street Track and Trail getting a car service that day, me and Shirley. And another story to go with that, but I'll tell later on Lepley's that owned Street Track and Trail. Later raced with Dave Lepley and that. But anyway, I'm up there, and I don't know, it was Dave or whoever there told me, hey, they got this race going on up at Lyonsville. It's a local track up there. It's Battle of something it was called. A bigger promotional thing they were doing that weekend. So I called Dave, said, hey, you want to go to a race? So anyway, we went up there. This here was just 2 years ago, say 2022. And so it's me and Dave go up there. It's a night race, and we're walking down through. It's more a local race. And see, there's a rider there, has her name Musquire on the back. I thought, has to be related to Leland. How many Musquires are there? And this is a girl that's racing. Younger girl, but anyway, so we walk over, and Dave says, there's a guy there by her, and Dave says, do you know a Leland Musquire? And the guy says, yeah, he's my dad. So anyway, talking to him, and he says, and Leland's here. So, kind of cool story. Leland happened to be there that night, so we got to meet up with Leland and kind of reminisce about some old times and that. But anyway, Leland now has a granddaughter that is racing, and as a girl cleaning up. So I mean, Leland was very fast himself, but his granddaughter's doing very well. I mean, she's racing like the amateur stuff in that, but she's clean. I think she won like 4 of the classes that night up there, so she's doing very well. And the other guy, Mark Garrison, also District 5 guy, raced around here all the time. Next shot up here, looking at that picture, this here was from, I got to read the thing, but this here was from a Supercross, Atlanta Supercross, number 99 there. That is Mark Garrison, guy from the picture below, District 5 guy. And in that same picture, I see Johnny Omar, number 40. Not sure, I'd have to look it up and check, but I think Johnny Omar is a coach trainer for possibly Jet and Hunter Lawrence right now today. But this here was a Supercross race from back then with Mark Garrison. which also has Johnny Omar in there. So that gives you an idea of the level of competition and the riders in that. And also, I guess that was the year of, you got Hannon Barnett in the shot right above it, of there. So go on up. The next one was Timmy Coombs and Charlie Goodby. I already kind of give the sad story of Charlie Goodby. Both rode for Team Green. Nisley, again, District 5. This one here is just a Rocky Ridge article. Kind of is in there, that article there. That day there, I was apparently had a little article on my race that day. It just had the it was one of the largest classes of the day, and I got, in the end, I got the overall win that day. I guess that's why I captured that out of there. Over here was Tim Dome, another District 5 guy. McGafferty and Ayers dominate at Rocky Ridge. Again, Ayers raced motocross as well. So another very good competitor here in the District 5. And this here would have been, I'm not sure what the year was, but this here would have been for the Amateur Nationals, I'm guessing, which would have moved on then. These here was just a list of the riders, of the District 5 riders moving on into the Nationals, which you had Tommy Carson. Again, he's been around forever, still racing yet today. Timmy Coombs, Tim Dome. Not sure who the next guy was, but Dave, like Yankovic, something like that. Chuck Byler, Tom Biox, Robert Mills in the 100 class. Bobby Mills, his dad, just to give a little bit of rundown who Bobby Mills now has Spring Valley Golf Course there in Mercer. But back then Bobby, well, he was in the 100 class. But him and his dad, Terry Mills, owned quite a few things around the Mercer area. They owned a campground down there that was outside of there. He owned, there used to be a barn restaurant down there, owned the golf course, and then later when Terry passed away, Bobby Mills now is, I believe it's Bobby and his mother together, still run Spring Valley Golf Course down there. But me and John Gallagher's down there golfing the one day and run into Bobby there at the golf course. That's been a number of years ago too. But so basically then, I guess this video was more just to give a rundown of who was around at that time, what racing was like. And I just wanted to do that before I continued on with the racing in that, sort of like my racing in that from in the 80s. And to keep the videos down to a more reasonable length and separate them, I thought I'd do this one first, and then the next one I will probably proceed on into 1980 to 81 and some of my racing in that, the results and stuff there. So I'm just going to glance through some of my different things here real quick before I conclude on this here, to see if I'm missing anybody. Or I will say too, at that time Johnny Gallagher, who Johnny was a very good friend of mine, but Johnny was just, Johnny's younger. He was running the mini classes at that time. Just in the his very beginning years later, you know, at that time was he was running an 80 or something. And I guess I'll give a little story right now while I'm thinking of it, because I got many stories with Johnny. But first time that Johnny ever come up to ride with us, he lived down the road from Clay's, had a farm down there, or his parents did. And Johnny would have went to Lakeview School District down the road. So anyway, got to know him a little bit from at Harbor Woods. His mom and dad would bring him, and he would, at that time they run minis in the morning and then the bigger bikes starting in the afternoon. Johnny was running an 80 at that time, but then they would stay and watch, and he got to know us and we got to know him a little bit. So, and we had, Clay and them had a track, or several tracks we had at Clay's place there where he had a shop. And so we're going riding, and Johnny was going to come up. He must have known we were riding that evening. And so it was out by the milk house there at the farm. We were getting ready to go riding, and I could hear this bike coming. And at that, they were 2 cycles. It was a little 80 that he was riding, and you could hear him coming from a mile off. He was coming down the dirt road too there, and you could just hear that bike just screaming. Like he didn't know to let it off going down the road. He just held it wide open, so you could hear him coming. You know, almost like if you'd take a chainsaw and hold the thing wide open and never back off the trigger. That was Johnny coming down the road on his 80 the whole way over there, and he come pulling in, and the exhaust is just glowing red when he pulls up there, out the back, and that from him screaming it like that. And just a little funny story that kind of went along with the beginnings of kind of first getting to know Johnny and when I met him, and how that went. And I'll also give a little thing too, like maybe some would wonder, like Clay, a good friend of yours, owns a Bull Taco Can-Am dealership. Why did you not ride for Clay at Lakeside Cycles? And just a short story to go with that is that Bull Tacos their reputation for dependability was very poor. I mean, they blew up all the time. And Bull Taco and Can-Am, neither one built a decent, they primarily built a 250 and open bike. Their 125 was so far outdated that it really wasn't competitive. And Clay understood that as well. You know, it sometimes he'd harass me a little bit about it, but you know, like, hey, you need to be on one of them. But Yamaha was just way better bike for the 125 class at that time, and that's what I was racing. So that's why I never really rode a Bull Taco or Can-Am. It's just they didn't build a good 125 at that period in time. So never rode for Clay out of there. I mean, I would wear the Lakeside Cycles jersey and stuff at time, but still always rode a Yamaha. Just happened to think of that since I was telling the story of Johnny showing up there at the milk house over there to go out riding that night. And, so that was just another little story to go on with that. And I think I'll kind of conclude this video for now. And then the next one coming up, we'll be starting the 1980 to 81 year.